On today's World Insight, 2 decades after its return to China, Macau forges ahead to be hipper, better, and different. Witness Macau in Transition, a World Insight special.
The Macau skyline remains the same, but the Macau to be is underway. On 20th anniversary of Macau's return to China, let me take you around the city. Explore Macau's diversified economy, from financial services to tourism and entrepreneurship. See up close Macau's aspiration, cultural diversity, rising infrastructures, and its vibrant younger generation. Macau in transition, only on World Insight. Hello, I'm Tian Wei in Macau. Behind me, the skyline of the city, bringing you our special series, Macau in Transition, on the 20th anniversary of its return to China. This week, we will do the rounds in Macau, explore fascinating facets of this city, and providing you with real insights on its transition. The economy, the education, the entrepreneurship, the infrastructure, and above all, the aspirations to be better and different. First, let's go down Macau's history a bit. The place was a fishing village in its early days. A few hundred years ago, it became a trading port. It went under Portuguese rule as a colony 100 years ago. In 1999, Macau returned to China with the principle of one country, two systems. And this week, it's celebrating the 20th anniversary of that historic moment.
Macau lies on the western side of the Pearl River Delta, with Hong Kong to the east. It borders the mainland's Guangdong province to the north and the South China Sea to the east and south. The port city was once an unimpressive and impoverished fishing village, but it has now become a fast-developing international metropolis. It has a quite distinctive culture, featuring blends from the east and west that were formed over a century of colonial history. In the 16th century, a group of Portuguese merchants set foot in Macau, seeking to expand trade relations to the east. They agreed to rent the land from the main government annually, and it essentially became a trading post for the Portuguese. However, 300 years later, Macau fell completely into the hands of the Portuguese Empire as one of its eastern colonies. The European country kept the territory under its rule for over a century. In the late 20th century, China and Portugal conducted 4 rounds of negotiations over the transfer of Macau. The two countries signed the Joint Declaration in 1987, which set Macau's return to China on December 20, 1999. Since day one of its return, Macau has enjoyed a large degree of autonomy under the one country, two systems principle. Walking about the streets of Macau, you'll see how the city is immersed in a diverse array of cultures. Everywhere you look, Gothic buildings mingle with modern architecture. Local streets' nameplates are written in both Chinese and Portuguese. Historical memories left an indelible imprint on both the city's culture and landscape.
History is always important to learn and fun to explore. About Macau's historic return to China, he is the one to talk to, Minister Antonio Martins de Cruz from Portugal. He was then foreign advisor to the Portuguese Prime Minister when China and Portugal was in intense negotiation for Macau's return to China. He experienced firsthand that historical moment. It's wonderful to see and meet witness of history.
Well, in the last 35 years, I follow very close the relations between China and Portugal. I was very much involved in the negotiations of the future of Macau when China and Portugal negotiate in '86 the joint declaration. And I was here in Beijing for the ceremony of the signature in April '87. And I still remember I was with the Prime Minister of Portugal in the long meeting, 2 hours, with Mr. Deng Xiaoping.
What was it like when you, together with the Premier of Portugal, meeting him?
Oh, he was fantastic. He was telling us the opening of China at that time to the foreign markets, in the financial aspects, in the trade, the expected development of China. And I believe that your development is even bigger of the vision of Mr. Deng Xiaoping 35 years ago, because it's fantastic how China changed in the last years.
Yeah.
And we are very happy in Portugal because we are the oldest European friend of China. And this is, we are very proud of our relations with China since the 16th century.
What was the most difficult part of the negotiation?
Was the timing. The most difficult part was the timing.
Explain, please.
It was the timing, because we had a short period, a few months only, to negotiate. But thanks God, was a very successful negotiation.
You were working as a young consultant for the Prime Minister and the Portuguese government at that time.
I was the Foreign Affairs Advisor of the Prime Minister.
Exactly. So tell me more about the inside stories.
Well, several members of the Chinese government visit Lisbon at that time, and the Portuguese came to Beijing, and we managed to, in parallel, negotiate several things. For instance, the transitional period of 10 years,
yes,
the land system, the financial system, which banks from Portugal and for China could have the power to print money for Macao, for the Pataka who exists today. So we split in several points the negotiations, and we did it in parallel system.
Very efficient.
It was, as far as I was told by my Chinese friends, was easier for the Chinese part to negotiate with Portugal than to negotiate with the United Kingdom.
That's for sure. That's for sure. But which part do you think you remember the most among all the issues that you need to have a common line and a common ground?
Well, you just mentioned in the beginning of our conversation the probably a more difficult part was to respect the one country, two systems in economic issues. I'm going to give you an example.
Yes, please.
The land, Macao is very small territory. It's a small territory, 20 square kilometers, yes. A peninsula and 2 islands. Land is very expensive in Macao. So we need to find solutions with our Chinese friends how to deal with the problems of the land during the transitional period in order to allow the new administration in Macao to control the situation after '99. And this, we create a special working group on lands,
yes.
work very well during all the 9 years of the transitional period, and was a successful one. But at the beginning, it was necessary to adjust positions on the Chinese ideology and with the capitalistic rules of Macao before.
Can you be more specific? It sounds very interesting to me.
We need to solve the questions of the free market on land on one side, and the other side, administrative solutions to preserve the lands that the new Macao administration would need after the handover, especially the reclaimed land.
Yes.
They have done a wonderful job in Macao recently, and this was the result of these successful negotiations between China and Portugal.
At the time when you were meeting with Deng Xiaoping, it was after the successful resolve of the Hong Kong issue.
That's right.
What was it like for Portugal at that time to look at how Hong Kong was resolved between China and Britain, and how much aspiration, did it provide your side with the solutions about Macau?
Of course, the joint declaration that China signed with the UK, United Kingdom, was some kind of reference for our diplomatic talks with China. But I believe that thanks to the wisdom of the Chinese government and to the work of the Portuguese government, we have a better agreement from Macau than the agreement for Hong Kong.
What do you mean?
For instance, the development of Macau is reflects this agreement. The fact that there is a lot of inhabitants of Macau who can use Portuguese passports, for instance, and the Chinese government allowed them, and everybody is very happy. And the political and social and economic life of Macau is much more quiet than Hong Kong. Especially nowadays, you can see that Macau is an example of development and of political and social stability.
Mr. Minister, many have been asking questions and curious about one country, two systems, this very special arrangement from the very beginning, decades ago. Now, of course, with all the latest development, people are even more curious about exactly what they should mean and what they will mean for the future. What do you think?
I believe that it was a good principle, I believe, established for Mr. Deng Xiaoping at this time, and this was essential for the negotiations with the British and with the Portuguese about Hong Kong and then Macau. And I believe it's a very successful formula, because from the 80s until today, it will apply in these two special administrative regions, Hong Kong and Macau. And I think this could be an excellent example for other Chinese people who look at the mainland with this trust that these principles of one country, two systems applied both in Hong Kong and Macau.
After its historic return to China, Macau has faced the challenges and opportunities. Its gaming industry is 7 times larger than that of Las Vegas, but its economy needs new momentum and diversification. On that, the former negotiator and a lifelong fan of Macau had this to say. If you look at the development of Macau over the past 20 and 30 years, particularly with the recent initiatives of Belt and Road initiative of Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, how do you see all of these mechanisms is giving Macau opportunities? And as a result also, how many challenges Macau needs to overcome in order to take great advantage of these initiatives?
This new Chinese initiative, the Great Bay Area, including Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Macau, Zhuhai, and Guangdong, were responsible by about 30% of Chinese exports. It's very important in economic and financial questions, and also in tourism aspects. It's very important. This is a big challenge for Macau, because Macau is very small. It's surrounded by big areas like Zhuhai, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and especially, of course, Guangdong. But I believe that Macau can solve the questions, because Macau is very much turned to the tourism activities. Now they are more and more enter in what we call the Congress tourism, organization of Congress and international meetings. It's very successful in Macau. The Macau Forum, that means a platform for the economic relations between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries in the world. the 9 countries in 4 continents who speak Portuguese, and they had this platform, the Macao Forum, which is very important also for the relations between China and these 9 countries in Latin America, Africa, Europe, and even Asia with East Timor. And China is profiting a lot from this platform. Macao will be always a bridge between China and Portugal, always. For the strong presence of the Portuguese companies in Macao,
Yes.
and the fact that in a cultural way, for us, Macao is the Portuguese door to China.
I also want to ask a question regarding the financial cooperation. How do you see the nature of this kind of cooperation? Because Macao, when people think about it, financial sector very important given the fact it is a Congress so-called industry and given the fact of history of Macao's economic development. What do you make of that, Mr. Minister?
I think Macao could create more capabilities to even develop more the financial possibilities. Of course, the Chinese financial institutions like the Bank of China have already banks in Portugal, and they operate a lot. We have already 4 Chinese banks in Portugal, which is very important. But we are creating more and more direct financial links between China and Portugal. As you probably know, Portugal was the first European country who issued a public debt in renminbis, what we call the Panda operation, and we are very happy with this, and we hope to repeat it. And this was organized by the Bank of China in Portugal.
Before you go, I would love to ask one question.
Yes.
As a witness to history back in the 1980s, as someone who participated in the overall process of Macao's return to China, and also as a witness later of Macao's development, and certainly the changes we're seeing today in our world, including this region, what do you make of this example of Macao worked out so far? What do you think will be the biggest takeaway about this?
Well, I think the example of progress, development, and stability of Macao could be an example for other regions. And I believe that neighbors must look to this situation with a positive one and contribute to development, to the happiness of the people, and especially this could be important for China because China can present always Macao as a successful example.
What do you make of the latest situation in Hong Kong, if I could ask you, just as an observer?
I have been several times in Hong Kong. As an observer, we don't understand. I believe that the population of Hong Kong is divided. A minority who is creating a lot of problems. Probably they don't realize that they are creating problems for the future economic development and financial development of Hong Kong. Probably these negative consequences will turn against the people who are doing these kind of things, which what I hope is that they could, the Hong Kong people, quickly find a solution and find a solution to contribute to the stability and to the continuity of Hong Kong. And the inhabitants of Hong Kong, they must understand, as I believe that the inhabitants of Macau, they understand, that the situation in Hong Kong is a result of international negotiations between China and UK. And the joint declaration must be respected because it's an international treaty, must be respected. there is a segment of the population of Hong Kong, for political reasons, for economic reasons, I don't know, I'm not an expert, who do not understand that the joint declaration must be respected. And in this case, Macau is a very good example.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for sharing your stories as a history witness.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you for your insights. What a pleasure.
谢谢.
Thank you. You're watching Macau in Transition on World Insight. Coming up, Macau's diversifying economy and breakout creative industry. My exclusive interview with one of the most popular pop music group / entrepreneurs from the place. This is Macau in Transition, a World Insight special on the 20th anniversary of Macau's return to China. I'm Tian Wei. I'm coming to you with Macau's skyline right behind me. 20 years is a short time in history, but for the people living it, it is much more than number. It's a big part of their lives. That's what MFM told me when I talked to this pop music group from Macau in their small studio in the local creative industry hub.